Viridian, the Green Guard. By Clouds. My Head in the Clouds Not Coming Down. Read by Shadow 5. Chapter 91. Shock. Summary. The students have been scattered. Denki tumbled to the ground and landed in a rough roll. Yaorozu and Jiro were already on their feet and dusting themselves off, but he couldn't see any of the other classmates anywhere. He activated his quirk and let a small amount of electricity coat his body as he got to his feet. Where are we? Where's everyone else? Yaorozu pointed to the roof. We are still in the USJ, but I don't know where the others ended up. All over. Jiro's earphone jack swiveled around as she listened. They're all still inside, as far as I can hear, but that's not our problem right now. We've got company. The three of them shifted into battle stances as villains started coming out from behind the rocks. There were a couple dozen from what Denki could tell, and all of them looked ready to attack. He wasn't ready for this. Jiro, what weapon do you want? Yaorozu said softly. I'm making quarter stuff for myself. Something sharp? Jiro said. Like a sword or something? Yaorozu nodded and her hand started glowing. I'm making it from carbon fiber, so it'll be a little different than a traditional sword, but if I make it out of metal, Kaminari will just pull it out of your hands as soon as he starts using magnetism. Cool, Jiro said. You might want to ditch your belt too. Yeah, Yaorozu said. Good idea. Kaminari, pull the villains close and either take care of them yourself or pass them off to us. Sound good? Kaminari let one for a wrap around him. Yep. Jiro slashed her sword. Let's do this. Uraraka coughed up a last mouthful of water as Minato slammed into the deck next to her. Thanks for the save, Sue. Sue nodded. Sure thing. You think everyone's spread out? Yeah, probably. Uraraka nodded. And if the areas are anything like ours, they're surrounded by villains as well. These guys can't seriously be here to kill All Might, Minato screamed. All Might's super strong, so he'll save us, right? If Ida can get to him in time, Sue pointed out. But we need to be focused on not getting tortured and killed. Killed? Minato's eyes widened and he started sobbing. No, I can't die. Not without touching Yaorozu's boobs. Uraraka rolled her eyes. So, how far can you jump? Not all the way to shore, especially not carrying anyone else. Sue shook her head. And landing in the water would put us in the middle of the villains. And if the two of us are weightless? Uraraka suggested. I'd still be too heavy, Sue thought for a moment. Unless you canceled my gravity after we had momentum. That'll make it harder to land, though. They screamed as the boat jerked, and was cut in half by one of the villain's quirks as they got impatient. Uraraka took a deep breath. Still less risky than staying here. Let's go. Inasa grinned and wiped the rain from his eyes. They don't know our quirks. Tokiyami nodded seriously. If they had, they would not have sent me to the shadows or you to the gale. Koda's eyes widened, and he shook his head and pointed to some of the villains pouring out from the streets and alleyways around them. Inasa frowned. Koda was the only one at a disadvantage here, since there was no way any animals would be out in a storm like this. Inasa used the wind to blow the villains away and buy them a little time. We need to get out of here. But the exit has been lost in the mists of darkness, Tokoyami observed. Inasa looked around at the fake city, his eyes locking onto a fake mailbox that had been bolted to the floor, and he grinned as he formed a mini tornado and ripped it from the cement, guiding it up towards the roof. The wind was so loud that they could hardly hear the crash as the ceiling shattered, but the brightness outside coming through the hole cut dramatically through the rain like a spotlight. Inasa grinned. Then we'll just have to make our own. Toshinori rushed toward the USJ as fast as he could. It had taken all of his self-control not to interfere in any incidents this morning, but as soon as Nezu had called him and told him that they were expecting an attack, he'd known he had to be in top shape. The teachers had discussed it and had decided it was more important for him to be around to protect the main campus, rather than going to the USJ with Class 1A, which had seemed like a good idea, until Aizawa and 13 had missed the last check-in. With the threat of an attack, Nezu had insisted on activating an emergency protocol that detected mandatory check-ins every half-hour. It wasn't anything big, just a text to prove that they were still alive and well, but neither Aizawa nor 13 had sent their last text, which meant that either young Kaminari had caused a power outage, or something had happened. Toshinori was desperately hoping it was the former. He could handle being chewed out again, But if the students were being attacked and he wasn't even there to help them? He heard a scream coming toward him, and his eyes widened as he realized that Ida was racing toward him far too fast, engines revving at full power as he raced ahead. He only had a split second to brace himself before young Ida was barreling into him, and Toshinori let himself move with the boy to soften the sudden stop and let him calm down. I am never allowing Kaminari to strategize again. Ida's eyes were wide as he panted. All Might, thank goodness. Young Ida, Toshinori clapped his shoulder. What's going on? Is everything all right? Ida swallowed and shook her head. There's villains. They have some teleporter and a lot of street villains as well. 13 was injured and my classmates insisted I go on ahead to bring help when the door was blocked by a swarm of bees. The other teachers and some extra heroes should already be on the way, All Might said. Continue on and brief them on the situation. I'll go help Aizawa and 13. Good work, my boy. Ida nodded in determination and left a tray of dust behind him as he raced away. All Might jumped in the opposite direction. So much for hoping that it was just young Kaminari losing control of One for All again. Katsky stared in horror at the Nomu, Izuku's quirk explanations echoing in his mind as he realized what he was looking at. Izuku had warned him that forcing too many quirks into a person could cause brain damage, but he hadn't really known what it meant until he saw Nomu's dead eyes staring at nothing as he pinned him to the ground. The Nomu was brain dead, only capable of following Shigaraki's orders. If things had gone wrong, this was what Ogawa would have become. Katsky didn't want to believe it. What was the villain factory doing here? Were they just here to kill All Might? Had the grunts known? They couldn't have, otherwise Maki and Akiko would never have joined up, but still, were they wanting to test their experiments? Were they trying to find new subjects? How much trouble were they really in? Now that he was pinned, Shigaraki wasn't too concerned about him and had turned most of his attention to Aizawa, content to let Katsky stew over the fact that he could be killed at any second, like he'd ever let that happen. If he couldn't hurt the damn thing, then he'd have to find another way out. He couldn't really see Aizawa fighting from his current angle. The Nomu was mostly in the way, but every so often a villain would be tossed his way, and Katsky gasped as he recognized one of them. What was Ogawa's sister doing thrown in with the same villains that kidnapped her brother? His pain faded into the background as he let rage and adrenaline take control. Arakune Ogawa, what the hell do you think you're doing? Katsky practically shook as Arakune brushed some dust out of her hair and turned toward him. You're that kid that came looking for my kid brother, aren't you? Katten or whatever. Seems like you're not as strong as you think you are. Just look at you. Are you crazy? Katsky growled. Don't you realize these are the same monsters that took your brother? Arakune froze for a moment, then shook herself. And why should I care about that? Maybe because you're family? Katsky scoffed. Aren't you supposed to care about him? I care about number one. Anything else gets you taken advantage of. Arakune rolled her eyes and started walking away. And look, I'm standing and you're pinned. Seems like you're the crazy one here. Fine, maybe I am crazy, Katsky spat. But do you even know what these people do? Look at this guy. They experiment on people, Arakune. They experimented on your brother. That made her stop. What are you getting at? I'm saying that you and your brother have similar quirks, Katsky glared at her. So what's to keep them from going after you next? Help me and prove that they shouldn't mess with you. Ladies? Denki flinched as a bunch of random metal objects flew toward him, and he just barely managed to deactivate his quirk in time. I think they're catching on to us. The whole magnet fishing strategy had worked well for about half the villains, but Denki supposed it was only a matter of time until the rest of the villains figured out that wearing metal around him was a liability and started ditching it. So now, rather than pulling in villains when he activated his quirk, Denki was met with a flow of knives, hammers, and even steel-toed boots. It wasn't working nearly as well. Yaorozu swung her quarterstaff into another villain. You can repel things too, right? Denki panicked. Not accurately. We don't need you to be accurate, Chiro yelled. We need you to be dangerous. Yaorozu tossed him a medium-sized bag that was way heavier than it should have been. It rattled as Denki opened it and poured some of the contents into his hand. Are these marbles? Steel shot, Yaorozu said. Jiro, let's find cover. Denki gulped, but took a deep breath and poured the marbles out all around him as the girl sat behind a rock. There's no shame in fighting dirty if it keeps you alive. Okay, let's make it rain. He had one for a flow around him, and all of a sudden, the marbles shot away from her like bullets. The villains tried to dodge, but between the marbles and all the metal they ditched earlier, the air was full of projectiles. Once the main wave had passed the villains, Denki took a deep breath and reversed the flow of his electricity, coiling the metal right back to him, taking out even more of the villains. The only problem now was preventing them from hitting him. Denki flinched and instinctively put a hand up to shield his head, not even realizing that he'd reversed his charge until the metal didn't hit him. He hesitantly looked up and took a sharp breath as he realized that all of the villains were either on the ground or running away. He'd taken out an entire group of villains without going over his limits. He'd fought at range without making himself completely useless. "Is it safe to come out yet?" Jiro yelled. "Yeah," Denki called back. "Thanks for the idea, Yaorozu. You're pretty and smart." "No time for flirting, you idiot!" Jiro rolled her eyes as they came out from behind the rock. Then she started panicking. "Kaminari! Behind you!" Denki had a flash of his body screaming "Danger!" again, but only briefly felt someone grab him by the back of the neck before instinct and muscle memory kicked in, and he threw his opponent over his shoulder and slammed them into the ground. He would definitely have to thank Izuku for making sure he was prepared for all kinds of unconventional capture holes, but he didn't have time to celebrate before the villain was burying into the ground. "Where'd he go?" Yaorozu tensed. "Jiro, can you hear him?" "Kinda." Jiro's face hardened in determination as she jammed her earphone jacks into the ground. "But I can definitely force him out into the open." The ground started shaking, and Denki had to widen his stance to settle himself until the villain popped out of the ground again. He looked a little dizzy, but he still managed to wrap a sparking hand around Yaorozu's throat and glare at them all. "Don't even think about making a move." The villain snarled and wrapped his hand tighter around Yaorozu's neck. "Or the girl gets it." Jiro shot him a panicked glance before putting her hands up in surrender, and Denki followed her lead. How was he supposed to fight him? He couldn't shock him from this far away, and even if he could, that would hurt Yaorozu too. The guy was wearing metal, but if he tried to pull him closer, that would pull her in as well and give him a chance to hurt her. If only he could find a way to separate them. Denki scored his expression as an idea occurred to him. He had 2 arms. Theoretically, he should be able to attract one and repel the other. He saw the glow of Yaorozu's quirk under the villain's hand and recognized that insulating armor she'd used against him during the Heroes vs. Villains exercise, so he didn't have to worry about the guy shocking her too badly. But he still needed to move quickly and not let the villain know what he was planning. Time to weaponize his flirting. "Yaorozu," Denki said playfully. "I know this isn't the best time, but as long as we're all gonna die anyway, are you sure you don't want to be attracted to me?" Denki grinned and winked, cheering internally as Yaorozu's eyes widened in understanding and the wisp started glowing. In just another minute, they'd be ready. The villain laughed. "You're seriously flirting at a time like this? I mean, shoot your shot, kid, but really?" "You're just jealous." Denki smirked as Yaorozu finished creating her bracelet. "It's not my fault you're repulsive." It felt like his brain was splitting in half as he focused on attracting Yaorozu with his left hand, and at the same time he repelled the villain with his right. He was terrified that it wouldn't work, that either he'd get it wrong or that the two would cancel themselves out. But he just kept shifting his stance until the villain lost his grip on Yaorozu. Then he pushed. The villain slammed into the cliffside at full speed, and Denki deactivated his quirk just in time to not electrocute Yaorozu as he caught her. "Wow," Jiro blinked. "I can't believe that actually worked." "Yeah," Denki gave a breathy chuckle. "Me neither." Oh, Denki getting to figure out that he can use both hands is like Izuku in the anime being like, "Oh my gosh, I have feet." And it's also the 10-month anniversary of Viridian the Green Guide. So thank you all for being here and listening to this podfic. And I hope you all enjoyed chapter 91, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!